Welcome to the Fierce and Fit Mentor Podcast. I'm your host, Clarice Yao, a holistic health coach dedicated to helping women over 40 achieve their fittest, fiercest selves. Each week, we'll dive deep into the unique challenges of menopause, including belly fat, weight gain, muscle building, hormonal imbalances, and more. These episodes are recorded live from my free Facebook group, Fierce Women Sculpting Powerful Bodies and Champion Mindsets. Be sure to check the link in the show notes to join our incredible community and access free content, challenges, and resources designed just for you. Today's topic is super interesting. It's called Building Muscles for Hormone Balance. So today's perspective is super interesting because it's not just about building muscle to lifting to build muscle or to lose fat, although that's kind of part of it, is that today's perspective is about building muscle for hormone balance. And it's actually very interesting because, as you know, I love studying and researching and doing all sorts of those good things. And, there's this like really, really great, she's very well known. She does all of these like crazy 5,000 people conference kind of trainer. And she's over 40 something. And she said something that was really fascinating because she said the fitness industry is really good at talking about building muscle and losing fat, but that the messaging for women over 40 is not accurate enough because very few people will really talk about hormone balance, which is the foundation for all of your changes, including dropping fat, including dropping belly fat, including building muscle. And so I want you guys to hear this perspective is why you're here is like, okay, the key for you over 40, 50, 60s is not so much like, let's just like build more muscle and lose fat. It's like, how do I balance my hormones better? Okay. The thing I want to talk about first is like changing the narrative a little bit, right? So it's not just like train more and burn more calories or train harder and eat less, that type of thing. And I want you to kind of think about like muscle building or training when you're over 40 is about shifting your hormones in the right direction, because when you're after 40, everything changes in your muscle physiology, in your metabolism, in your recovery, and in your stress response. These four areas greatly change as you age. Okay, so muscle physiology, which I'll talk a little bit about. Your metabolism obviously changes, your recovery changes, and your stress responses really change as you age. So the old concept of lifting until you're sore or like you completely fail is not necessarily true for women after 40, but like you can have moments of that. Also, it's not I need to train more, I need to go to the gym every single day, or even like I need to do HIIT 6 times a week or whatever, right? So I want you to change that mindset for yourself. Okay, more is not necessarily better. What we need to think about is strategic hormone aware intervention. Strategic hormone aware intervention, which is we need to think about muscle building more like, what is this doing in my body? What is this? How is this impacting my hormones? Okay. So we're going to talk about three areas. One is understanding what happens after 40 in terms of your hormones. We're going to talk about why muscle building is crucial after 40. So like we need to build muscle. But then the third one is really like the core of it is the key specificity in training for hormone optimization. So we're going to build on each section. Okay. So now let me ask all of you here first, before I dive into it, is how many of you here have trouble building muscle? If you have trouble building muscle, I want you to put trouble building muscle in the comments. Okay. Do you train almost every day? Or do you like think you need to go harder at the gym? If you're like, I need to go hard or I need to train like at the gym all the time, put it below. Okay. Or are you the opposite? You skip strength training because you don't like it. Because I know a few of my clients, not to name any names, tend to skip. And so that's under training. I mean, so there's undertraining and overtraining. Okay. So let's actually first dive into what happens to the female body after 40. A little bit of hormone knowledge. I'm not going to go too much in it because obviously I have a lot of different hormone lives I've done. And if you go crazy into all the hormones, it will take a lot of time. So I'm going to help you understand some baseline things. Okay. So the first thing is after 40, you have a decline in the anabolic hormonal axis, which is called your somatotrophic axis. What does that mean? Your decline in that somatotrophic axis is the growth hormone, insulin like growth 1 axis. Okay. If this is new to you, then you're going to be like, what do you mean? Okay. If you follow me for a long time, you'll know I say growth hormone and insulin growth factor 1, IGF-1, is the primary hormones responsible for women building muscle, not testosterone. Testosterone is in men. Not that we don't have it, but we depend way more on growth hormone and IGF-1. In a bit later, I'm going to talk about the influence of this, okay? Of why we need to be careful and optimize these hormones. But right now, just help you understand the hormones. So your GH, growth hormone secretion, drops. Your IGF-1 levels decline, which contribute to muscle mass loss, sarcopenia. And this also then diminishes your repair and regeneration. So just right off the bat, okay, as you age, and it gets worse and worse as you age, obviously, like 40, 50, 60s, with 50 being a really big marker turn. Okay. Usually women who turn 50 will really feel a big difference. Okay. So your GH and your IGF-1 levels will decline, which means your ability to build muscle declines, which also means your ability to repair and regenerate also declines. Secondly, your estrogen drops. This is not new to you. Your E2 drops. So why is this important to understand? Your estrogen supports muscle repair and satellite cell activation and inflammation moderation. So satellite cell activation is about how does your muscle actually grow, is that beside or around the muscle fibers there are these satellite cells that basically have satellite activity around the muscle. But the only way the muscle can grow is when it can actually contribute the nuclei to the muscle to help the activation of the muscle build. And so you need more satellite cell activation to build more muscle. This requires the right stimulation. Yes, like muscle building, right ways of building muscle, which I'll talk about later, but also right nutrition and right hormone signaling to make that satellite cell activation proper. As you age, your satellite cell activity declines. Okay. So you are always trying to fight to want more satellite cell activation because you want more nuclei donation to the muscles. When you're young, it's pretty quick. It's pretty almost you don't have to think about it. And I know all of you are like, I wish I was 20 again, right? But it's just the reality that I think one thing that's maybe a positive is as older women, we are more conscious, is conscious living. I've been looking at, I do all sorts of living and life success readings, but conscious ways of living instead of default living is the way you need to live as a menopausal woman, is consciousness in love, consciousness in the way you eat, and consciousness in the way you exercise. So for you, it's like, okay, how do I increase satellite cell activation, which is what we're going to talk about later. But it's just, again, helping you understand why the estrogen drops really affect satellite cell activity, meaning you have less. So if you have less satellite cell activity, it's harder for you to build muscle, as well harder to muscle repair. And I also say estrogen really controls inflammation. Okay. It's an inflammation regulator. Okay. So when your inflammation drops off, which all of us as women, as we age, it's going to drop off, means that the muscle repair environment is less friendly. So we are not able to protect ourselves from inflammation as much because of this estrogen drop. It's going to come into play when I talk a little bit later about nutrition and things like that. Okay, that's why inflammation moderation needs to be super on par as you age. So there's GH decreases, IGF-1 decreases, estrogen decreases, okay, which contributes to a lot of other hormonal responses that declines. The next one, most of you aren't happy to hear this, but your insulin sensitivity decreases because of all of these hormone drops. Why is this particularly important is that insulin sensitivity is how sensitive are your cells to uptaking glucose into the cells, okay? The more sensitive you are, the better you are. So typically, if you exercise more, you're going to improve insulin sensitivity. However, as you age, you become more likely insulin resistant. And so this actually contributes a lot to belly fat. Yes, and everybody just stops and go, "Ugh, the belly fat, right? So as you age, your insulin resistance rises. So this causes you to deposit more potential fat into your belly area, right? And today is not about insulin resistance. I'm not going to go too much into it, but this is why a lot of you have belly fat is that you may not be fully diagnosable insulin resistance, but you may have the beginning signs of insulin resistance. And so it's like already starting to put fat in the midsection. Okay. As well, that hormone shift causes a fat redistribution, meaning again, fat shifts from, maybe again, when you're young, your breasts, your hips, like just the nice things into straight into your belly, right? So this is why you're like, oh, that sucks. That's why as I age, I just feel like I constantly get a bigger belly. The belly fat is like no matter what they do, they work out, they train, they do all this, but the belly fat is there. So this is hormonally explaining to you what's happening. A lot of things are changing, the insulin resistance, the fat redistribution kind of principle. As well, your metabolic flexibility decreases. Okay, so your metabolic flexibility, what does that actually mean? It means your body's ability to switch between using carbs or using fat for energy. So, when you're young, your body has the ability to switch back and forth very quickly between carbs and fat usage very quickly. It's high metabolic flexibility. When you are starting to age and all of this shifts in your hormone, the metabolic flexibility greatly decreases, meaning it's not able to switch between burning fat and burning carbs and burning fat and burning carbs. It's not very flexible. It kind of gets stuck, right? It kind of, and in some ways, relates to insulin resistant a little bit, but you're just not very flexible in your metabolism. So, with that actually said, that is why I say to a lot of menopausal women, you do need to be a little bit firmer in your protocols in training and in nutrition because you don't have a flexibility like you did when you were younger. You need to be firmer in your nutrition, firmer in your workouts. Okay. And then the last thing is obviously, as you know, as you age, your muscle mass decreases quickly because of all these changes, which compounds the issue because if your muscle mass starts to decrease, your glucose sites decreases because glucose sites largely sits in the muscle. The red flag is if you don't train, your not only is insulin resistance rising, but there is no glucose sites to attract those glucose into your cells. So they're not there. Well, it's going to be in your bloodstream. First of all, there's a lot of risk, atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, high blood pressure, all that type of stuff. But more than that, then your body has to decide what to do with it, and it turns into fat, right? So we know that, okay, so many things happen after 40. And this is the first part, is just getting you to understand what is actually happening in your body. So this is the first part, is understanding the hormone changes. Okay. Now, another part I want to talk a little bit is what happens in that body recomposition, or what happens actually in your muscles a little bit. So as you age, you guys may know the statistic that you will typically have a 3 to 8% decline per decade after age 30. Okay. Now, if you have 60, 65 pounds of muscle in your body, which Some women don't even have that, okay, especially if you didn't grow up training regularly. But let's just say you have 65 pounds of muscle in your body, a decrease of 3 to 5% per decade is about a 3 to 5 pound drop. So think about this. If you are in your 40s, 50s, and 60s, this could mean between a 12 to 15 pound of muscle loss in total by the time you're in your 60s. And I talked to a lot of women in their 60s, right? This past weekend, I was talking to a few of them that were in their 60s, that you may be losing up to 12 to 15 pounds of muscle, which is a lot. Okay. So this is something you want to be like, everyone listening is like, okay, I need to protect that muscle mass at all cost. Okay. So what happens to postmenopausal women as you age and you get into postmenopause is the research shows that you actually have less muscle thickness. So your muscles become less thick. There's less motor unit recruitment. So your motor units cannot recruit those muscle fibers all at once, which, by the way, motor unit recruitment is partly a nervous system thing, and it's a training thing. And how much it can recruit those motor units together often means the amount of strength. Okay. So as you age into postmenopause, your muscle thickness decreases, your motor unit activation decreases, and obviously your muscle quality decreases. So there's a lot of things that happens that if you are not conscious of, these will all naturally happen in your body. Okay. And I was saying, even to my Fierce Woman team, it wasn't about muscle, but it was talking about how everything in life, if you want success, is an uphill battle. Okay. If you stop pushing that boulder and you let go, that boulder is going to start coming back down. Okay. So I want you guys to be very conscious of, like, okay, if I don't do something now, and now means now, your age, whatever age it is not never too late, but the earlier you can start, the better, because by default, your body is decreasing and decreasing, and things are breaking down, and all of these hormone shifts are causing decline, the sarcopenia, things in your body, right? So it's just understanding this. Okay, I need to be conscious of this. Now, another thing that I want to talk about. So this is the first section. I'm talking about understanding hormones. I will get to why building muscle is important, and then about like key specificities of training. But I just want everyone to have a good foundation first. So the next thing is talking about stress and hormonal regulation shifts. The big one. Okay. The big one. And every functional doctor, people who really understand holistic wellness, will talk about this. Okay. So the role of the stress hormone cortisol becomes more complex as you age. And this stress hormone cortisol comes from either chronic stress in your body or excessive training. Okay. So you have to ask yourself too, like, is your training actually helping you get better results, or is it not? Okay. So chronic stress can come from many areas. A lot of people think, I'm not stressed. I'm not stressed, right? But stress is about how your mental, emotional capacities are, even your spiritual groundings. How are you handling life? How do you work through different things in your life? A lot of times people don't even realize their body is under high stress because their bodies have gotten so used to it. So a lot of people say, I don't feel stress. And I said, that's a poor indication. Don't tell me that. Go get tested, go tell me what your hormone profiles say, right? Because you not feeling stress, your body is able to adapt very well, but your inner workings can reflect really high cortisol. And so there is chronic stress. Like I said overtraining, right? I said also undertraining, right? Both can have stress responses in your body, because overtraining is stressing your body to a point where it cannot have proper recovery. But undertraining means you don't put enough stimulus in the body to create the right growth hormone, insulin growth factor, right? But also, there's another one. that is, I will, maybe expand on this later, but is that your body will experience high stress under nutrition problems, which I will go through in a bit. So you may not feel stressed. You may be training a lot, but anything that you're doing in your body that is inputting certain nutrition can cause internal stress that you're actually unaware of. And this is the hardest part for a lot of women over 40, 50, 60s is like they think all this external things is the key to success, but then they're not really looking at what food is doing in their system, how food is causing the stress in their system, right? This is what I mean is that the types of stress your body experiences makes it hard for your body to maintain balance, and you need to look at multiple areas of stress. And this is a big message of the today's live is like when you're talking about building muscle, it is almost simultaneous. Okay, I want everyone to listen carefully. If you're over 40, you cannot think separately about cortisol. It is like together. Where is my cortisol setting? How is this affecting my cortisol? Building muscle, is this bettering my cortisol or dysregulating my cortisol? Is my eating bettering my cortisol or dysregulating my cortisol? And this is kind of a missing message in the menopausal space of a lot of like the fitness realm, right? Is like they're not talking about the hormones. And I want you to think more cortisol. What's happening with this as I eat, as I train, and all the other things. Okay. And I just want you to know that like your hormone levels looking normal on a lab test may not always indicate the full picture because it is showing like one point in time. Or let's just say you have to fast before you get tested. So it's before food has entered your system. How does your body then regulate that nutrition down, the down regulation of that hormone pathway? And I want the people to understand because I have so many women come to me and say, I got tested. My doctor says that my hormone, my cortisol is regular, but yet I have belly fat. I still feel off. And I just want you to understand that it's like this. Okay. You all remember going to school. You all remember actually like taking an exam. How many of you have crammed before? I'm sure many people cram, lots of people cram in university and stuff like that. The thing is, if you cram like 12 hours before, 24 hours before, you're going to probably do pretty well on that test and you'll get a high mark. But it's actually not rare indicative because it is indicative of a short term one marker in time, and it isn't actually truly reflective of what you actually truly know, because how many of you have forgotten exam things 1 week later? Everybody hear this? Think about the logic of this. So when you do testing, sometimes the testing is testing one moment in time, one point of entry, and not looking at how the down regulation or how certain hormones are changed in your body. And for example, I once talked about thyroid hormones, and I said like it's easier to test for T4 and maybe the beginning regulations of a thyroid T4, T3, but it doesn't track how thyroid is moved through your system. And I have so many women who says that they are tested generally normal on thyroid hormones, yet they feel like their body is really off. And because it's very hard to test for different, sometimes it's, like again, I'm not a lab specialist, but it's almost too hard to test for the down regulation of that. Okay. So, before I move forward with this, I just want everybody to understand 26 eyeballs on here is just because your hormone test says normal. Okay. I need you to listen to your body. I need you to go, well, no, something's still wrong. I feel energy's low. I still have a lot of belly fat, but my hormone test came back normal. Like this isn't making sense. I need you to listen to your body, and I need you to think broader than one point in time of one test. This is why it's like a lot of these women struggle with tons and tons of belly fat. There is dysregulation in their system, even though some of their test results are sort of like normal, which is telling you that the test is not showing everything that is necessary. Next thing I want to talk about is why muscle building is crucial after 40. Okay. So we're going to actually get into some science here, but only one deep part, because if I get too much, you guys will all eyes crossed, nose crossed, all of that. Like when I did the gene expression one, allele 3, 5, 6, 7, people were like, I didn't understand what you're saying about genetic coding. I'm like, okay, well, we're gonna give you one thing to absorb here, okay? But we'll start first. Why is muscle building crucial after 40? So I want you to think beyond 40, it's beyond aesthetics, okay? Muscle is more than just shape. Although we all love it, and I do too. I come from a bodybuilding background. I still love that, is really important. But it's to recognize that muscle is a metabolic engine, like as in like what's the other uses of muscle, right? It's a metabolic engine. It's a hormone responder. So the more muscle, the better you build, the better the hormone response is. It's a bone protector. We all know that. The more muscle you build and lift in those areas that you lift, your bone will become denser. And it will also provide functional strength, meaning as you age, it will give you the functional strength to operate in life, right? So, when you preserve muscle mass, you improve your insulin sensitivity, you lower your risk of sarcopenia, you improve your metabolic health. Okay. So, we want to think about muscle building beyond just aesthetics. Okay. So, we want to think, okay, there's all these reasons why I need to make sure I emphasize on building muscle. So, training has the power to intervene in these hormone shifts and declines in your body, right? I mentioned earlier there's like hormone shifts and decline. When you train, when you have the right type of training, it can intervene in this hormonal decline. So, resistance training, okay, the proper kind, okay, and I'll talk about proper kind later. But when you actually have proper resistance training, both like resistance and weight training and also like aerobic capacities. So I'm not talking about right now, but like there's different ways you need to train. Okay, so you need different elements like resistance training, aerobic training, a little bit of HIIT training, like different things that you need. Okay, so when you have multiple ways of training your body, you significantly help increase IGF-1, which is insulin growth factor 1. Okay, insulin growth factor 1. So this is important because when we have proper resistance training and aerobic training, meaning some cardio. So, those of you who don't like cardio, you need a little bit. I'm not saying a lot, but having the right ratios of those types of things are important because the better your splits of different kinds of training in there, the more you're going to favor insulin growth factor 1 secretion. But also, there's an important part that the if you train the right way and boost enough of that insulin growth factor 1, you can greatly decrease something called insulin growth factor BP3, okay, so which stands for insulin like growth factor binding protein 3. So this IGF BP3, when it's in high amounts in your body, it actually binds, it's a binding protein. It binds to insulin growth factor. And if there's high IGF BP3, it will actually bind to IGF-1, meaning it will actually stop insulin growth factor 1. So you want to make sure that you're not having too much of the IGF BP3. Some is normal, but like let's just say in excessive of this type of protein binding hormone, you're going to have trouble building because it's blocking insulin growth factor 1. Okay. So this is a couple things I'm going to talk about today. And like I say, there's many types of hormones I can talk about muscle building. But I want to use this example to help you understand that if you don't address some of the key elements of how to eat and how to like exercise, you're going to have trouble controlling some of these things that get in the way of muscle building. With this example, IGF BP3, right? So the first thing is you're going to think, okay, well, so I need to control, I want more insulin growth factor 1. I need to make sure I have less IGF BP3. So what do I do, or what do I have to be careful of? So then the first thing is there's a lot of factors with IGF BP3, but one of the things I'll say is It is affected by chronic malnutrition, prolonged fasting. And I'm going to say to you, a lot of women are actually malnutrition, not just in low calories, but in how they eat. Okay. So a lot of women actually do not pick up the right amounts of nutrition in their body. This can happen from one, yes, under eating. We see this a lot, right, Oshone? We see this a lot. Women not eating enough calories. This can promote IGF BP3, which will stop the insulin growth factor 1. Another factor is malnourishment from lack of nutritional absorption. This comes from poor gut health, which I spoke about so much the last 2 weeks, of your gut health not being healthy, leaky gut syndrome, potentially things leaking through, and the body's microbiome being off. If your microbiome is off, if you have leaky gut syndrome, you're going to have poor nutritional uptake. Okay. And your poor nutritional uptake means you're going to be undernutritioned. You will be malnourished. You won't have the right nutrition. And this means you are going to have problems with insulin growth factor because IGF BP3, it goes up when this actually happens. And so you're not going to be able to build muscle properly in that context. Okay. If you struggle with bloating or it kind of gets bigger from the top down, like I talked about my 6 types of belly fat live, you're going to have problems. It's indicating problems with gut health, with dysbiosis, with gut imbalance potentially. So, how many of you struggle with gut imbalance in there? Do you have a belly? Is your belly extending from the top out? Do you struggle with bloating? Put below. Do you struggle with bloating? Belly fat? Poor digestion? Any of that? The second thing also talked about in the last couple weeks is about organ health. Okay, so your liver and kidney health really matters. Your insulin growth factor BP3 is produced in large part in the liver, and it is cleared and metabolized in part by other organs and the hepatic, kind of area. So any dysfunction in the hepatic renal dysfunction, so meaning hepatic portal vein and going to the bathroom, like I did a live on stool, may elevate or lower your IGF BP3. So what does this mean is that if your liver health or you have poor detoxification pathways, you will also have problems building muscle. And this is why optimizing liver function is really important, because if this isn't actually handled well, you're going to have trouble building muscle even if you keep going to the gym. And so it kind of comes back to what I said earlier. It's about nutrition, but it's also about understanding how to optimize the detoxification pathways. Your liver naturally detoxifies, okay? This is true, but its function decreases as you age. If you're not careful about this, if you're not careful about inflammation markers, you're not careful about how you eat, then your liver has a lot of stressors. It cannot get rid of this all the time. And this will get in the way of your gut health, get in the way of you gaining belly fat, get in the way of you gaining weight, and get in the way of you building muscle. And I know that talking to so many of you, it's like, oh my gosh, like this is what I feel. I feel like I like have belly fat. I feel like just like my body's not functioning. And I feel like I can go to the gym, I feel stronger, but I don't know if I'm building muscle, because they're all connected. So the second point is about you need to optimize your liver detoxification pathway, your kidney health. And this is going to come through really knowing how to eat properly and decreasing inflammation in your body. Your liver is constantly detoxifying, right? So, but if you constantly add more inflammation markers to it, it's having a hard time. And one thing I'm going to say to you is everybody like always knows the big ones. Oh, I know I'm not supposed to eat so much sugar. I know I like wheat and I stay away from wheat. But I will say that the hidden inflammation markers is where you're getting stuck, particularly if you have belly fat. If you have belly fat and you have had trouble losing it, you need to learn what are the hidden inflammation markers. And there's a lot. So put inflammation below if you want to learn this. Okay. And then with the inflammation specifically, it's a lot of studies, different studies and science studies have shown, but a lot of disease states like chronic inflammation and cancer will greatly affect the IGF-BP3, its ability for its production and clearance. And so just like I said, like those scientific studies just it just adds to it saying like, you know what, you're going to have trouble getting rid of inflammation in your body if you don't deal with this inflammation state in your body. Okay. Now another one is certain hormones and nutrition will affect how much IGF-BP3 you produce and how much it's inhibited. Okay. Like again, you can have a little bit. It's kind of like that, like omega-6 thing. I don't know if you've heard of it. Having some omega-6 is good, but too high ratio compared to omega-3s in your system will cause inflammation. It's kind of the same idea with IGF-BP3 is that you're going to have a little bit, but the problem is when it gets too high, it really inhibits IGF-1, right? Just like I said earlier. So there's certain things that affect how much is produced and how much is inhibited, estrogen being one of them, right? So like your estrogen levels will affect how much your IGF-BP3 will be there. And other things like supplementation. And today's live isn't about that, but like things like your vitamin D and different supplementation will affect kind of how much of this IGF-BP3 is present. So this is something I also talk a lot about with a lot of my clients is like, what is your supplementation regime? First, it's going to be your macronutrients, how well you eat. Bring down inflammation, how well you eat in your food. But the other part is your supplementation because a lot of your hormones come from fats and from proper healthy fats. So things like vitamin D functions in high fat environments. Okay, so you need to understand what supplementation you need to make the IGF-BP3 optimize. And so again, if you want to understand more supplementation, which by the way, the muscle sculpting masterclass, that one is gold. Again, if you don't have and have not watched that or learned that class, I would strongly encourage you because you will understand everything I'm saying here on a deeper context. Because in that specific muscle master class, I talk about the specific vitamins you need to optimize muscle growth, which is what I'm actually saying here, but in a more generalized context, right? So again, if you want to learn more about the muscle sculpting masterclass, you put that below. But if you're simply I need to understand supplementation, you put supplements below if you want to learn more. So I want everybody to understand that just because you have supplementation, it does not mean it's good for you. A lot of supplementation has problems in its ingredients that further exacerbate your inflammation. So it's kind of like one step forward, two steps back. Okay, so you need to make sure your supplementation has very good third-party testing. I talk about this on my supplementation live, NSF certification, GMP, good manufacturing processes that is labeled and certified. Don't just go off and buy any kind of supplementation. This is part of muscle building because your muscle building relies a lot on hormones and the hormone balance. And it's like, I need you to understand that not just taking anything goes in your body. A lot of the supplements that you take are highly unregulated and they can put anything in it, including a lot of inflammation markers in that supplement so that you get the vitamin. But then before the vitamin can get to your system, the inflammation has already dysregulated your system. Okay. So like I said, it is really, really crucial. I can't emphasize enough. I get scared sometimes when I see people what they take for supplements and they think it's good. Okay. Okay. I want you to think about muscle building as a hormone smart investment, meaning we want to build muscle because we want to optimize hormone. And from what everything I've shared with you is that you need to make sure that To get the best out of your training, you need to, and I'm summarizing, this is a summary of everything I said before, is you need to make sure nutrition is on par, and that means quality of food, lowering inflammation, and quantity of food, meaning the amount of food you have needs to be right and proper. There's always a window, okay, just so you know. Again, I might have said there's like a range that you could sit in that is okay, that is optimal. But if you're outside of that range, you could be in trouble, okay? So you have to have right quality and quantity of your nutrition. You have to make sure you have the right supplementations. You have to make sure you have right nutrition absorption. So that goes beyond just eating right. It's about addressing your gut health, the nutritional absorption in your gut, right? So, like looking at, do you struggle with belly fat? Do you have a belly bloat coming out? Addressing proper microbiome in your system. Do you have proper microbiomes in your system? It's correct nutrition absorption. You have to have proper protein intake as well, but like don't go too far, because I'm going to say for menopausal women is protein is super important, but when it comes to hormone balance, it's actually going to come down a lot to how you understand the ratio of the carb to the fat and more fat. Okay. Now it's bio individual, meaning I cannot on this live tell you, okay, you're gonna do this amount of fat, you're gonna do this, but I'm gonna tell you that as a menopausal woman, one of the biggest struggles for a lot of women is understanding that there's actually a high correlation between carbs and fat ratio that matters more than just protein. You need protein to build muscle, but if you don't have the right hormone balance, this is going to be problematic. So we need the right carbs to fat ratios. This is what's missing in a lot of people's training. Your carb loading really affect how much muscle you can build. But if your fat ratios are off, your hormones are not optimized, which is today's live. So your fats become extremely important. A lot of women like not really understanding the carbs and fat ratios are super important for your hormone balance, more than just protein. Okay. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I need to understand, like quality and quantity of food, just put, quality or quantity, or put macros. To be honest, it comes down to a lot about macros. Okay. Macros. You can put macros below, and that will help you understand, like, okay, there's a lot behind macros. And actually, it was just one more example, and then I'll get into the last point everybody's waiting for. How do you train to make sure you optimize your hormone? But one of the ladies that I met with on the weekend, she said to me, "Oh, I did this program and I did this program, and like I like lost this much weight on this particular program name, and blah 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 blah." And she's like, "Yeah, but after I finished, like, it's like eventually after a year, I started gaining a lot of weight, and I kept gaining more and more weight." And actually, I didn't even realize, to be honest, until I was talking with her. I was like, okay, writing down notes. I'm trying to build the individual profile of the person, because I believe coaching the person has to be individualized. But when we got to quantity of food, and I was talking about calories and macros, I said, like, we need to have your right caloric count, but we also need to have your right macro count, which is your right protein ratios to your carb to your fat ratios. And I said, I know you probably already do it, but I'm like, probably your ratios are off. And she said to me, oh, no, I only did calories actually in the last program. And I was like, oh, you didn't do macros? And she's like, no, I generally kind of follow Fitness Pal and what it tells me, but I don't really do the ratios of the protein, carbs, and fat. And right there, I tell you, my head went ding. And she knows when she watches, because I know she'll watch this tomorrow. I was like, you don't do macros? And she's like, no. I said, oh. And her belly has been increasing in size and increasing in size. And she trains really hardcore. She trains at the gym. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to say to you that honestly, that's a big missing component. If your macros are not there and you're only focusing on calories, your hormones are going to be really off. Your hormones cannot be balanced if all you're focusing is on calories. What if your caloric count shows way too high carbs, or actually way too high protein, which I've seen in two instances, or maybe three, on their lab report. Their lab report came back showing, certain elevation of certain markers that shows that they were not processing protein well enough. It was too much protein in their system. And so this is something I need you to understand. Macros is really important to your hormone balance, is beyond just aesthetics. It's not aesthetics. It's not just like, I believe, because I have a bodybuilding background, you need macros for really good body recomposition and muscle build. But if I had to speak more specifically about hormones to menopausal women, I'm going to say you need the proper ratios of your protein, carbs, and fat, so that you don't cause a massive imbalance between your carbs and your proteins and your fat. Okay. So again, if you want to learn more, put macros below to better understand how you can optimize your hormones and build muscle properly. Okay. Awesome. Now, before I get to the last section here, if you're enjoying learning this and you really love it, write a comment below. What do you love learning? Or what did you like? Oh, this is so interesting. I love learning this. I didn't realize this. Or I love hearing your feedback on this as well. I would love if you can put, or, you can't really tag someone right now on this, because once this live ends, it regenerates a new one. But, if you feel like, oh, I would love for my friend to see this, maybe you could put replay. And once we post a replay, we could send it to you. You could send it to your friend. You could put replay or share it with other people. Okay. Okay. We're going to get into the last section here. And I know this part, everybody's like, okay, this is like what I'm waiting for. So, in terms of the specificity in your training for hormone optimization, so meaning like, how do you need to train to get your best hormone optimization? Okay. So remember this, right? Training after 40 is not about more reps, heavier weights, and more cardio, right? We don't want this old school way of thinking, but we do need to understand what kind of response we want in our body. Okay. So in your training, you want to make sure you maximize hormone response, the acute hormonal response. So, what is the acute hormone response? We want to maximize this response, okay? So, in acute resistance training, you are going to see an increase in growth hormone and insulin growth factor 1, as I had already mentioned. Testosterone, not so much. A little bit, but not so much. More, that happens more for men. So we're going to see this increase in growth hormone, insulin growth factor 1, when you resistance train. Okay. So when does this actually optimizing push more? Is when there's sufficient volume involved. Okay. So when there's a lot of volume of your training involved, this will actually start to increase. When there is moderate to high intensity of the training. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying it needs to be high, high, high all the time, which we don't want, but moderate to high. What I'm saying is there needs to be a level of difficulty in your training. Moderate to high, but not so hard that like your body's just like stressed to the max, right? But what I find sometimes is I see a lot of training on opposite spectrum. Either it's too low intensity, you're staying with the low weights, or like it's just too easy. Like it's just like it's too easy. Like push, there needs to be more push. Or that there's a lot of machine work. I've seen that, again, on the weekend, I talked to someone about this. A lot of machine work. It's not that machines is wrong. There's a place for it, but if it's too much machine work, the difficulty is not high enough. Okay. And so remember, we need moderate to high intensity training. It should be hard, not so hard that you cannot do it. Okay. So it should be moderate to high. If you are kind of like training, but it's like not so difficult, you may be under training. So you should be moderate to high to get a really good boost of growth hormone and insulin growth factor. It should involve very large muscle groups and a lot of compound movements. Okay. So for you that's listening, if you love working arms or shoulders, or you like I love to do my glute things. Every girl does, trust me, even me. But it's like if you're not really doing multiple compound movements, you're doing okay, but you're not getting your maximum GH and insulin growth factors. And what does Oshone know? Oshone knows I love big compound movements, multi-joint, multiple different types of compound movement, which is why I like kind of the bodybuilding approach, but functional approach. I think that sometimes depending on your type of training, sometimes we can focus on just only one type of movement, one type of joint. It's just not effective enough. So this is what I'm trying to tell you is like we need to push the multi-joint, multi-compound, big muscle groups, sufficient volume, and it should be moderate to high intensity. Should feel quite difficult, but not so much that you're so stressed. Okay, so I said sufficient volume, moderate to high intensity, large muscle group training, compound movements, multi-joint compound movements, and uh, short rest intervals, not too long in your rest intervals. And so, if you actually really understand, or you have done my programs, I have a lot of previous clients who are in this community. They'll understand. Like, I don't really give a lot too much rest, but not like you can't rest, but it's not something I emphasize massively on, just because you don't want massive amounts of rest time. If you want higher GH insulin growth factor, but you also don't want to be like dying on the floor and have high cortisol. So, of course, you're going to have to take a little bit of rest, but you shouldn't have too long of the rest. Okay, which is like, again, powerlifting. When I worked with a powerlifting coach, there is principles on that because they take longer, 3 to 5 minute rest times, partially because they're pushing the max load to almost a 90% RM, one max RM. In those instances, I understand, but in general, you shouldn't be resting so much, because in your training, you probably normally shouldn't always be pushing to 90 to 95% RM anyways in your training. So you want to make sure you have shorter rest intervals, and like I said, all the other things I mentioned. Okay, if you program your structure of your workout program, obviously involve bigger movements near to the top, your insulin growth factor and your IGF-1 will be the highest. Okay, so this is why I said methodology of your training and how your program is progressed really matters. So if you're listening to this, and I want you to think about sequence of your training, how the training is built or mapped out. If you're like curious, or you're like, I don't know, I just do random things when I go to the gym, I go on this machine and then I do this and all that, I want you to put like sequence there. Okay, I want you to think about that, because we're talking about optimization of your hormones. So optimization of your hormones involves everything I said before about how hard you have to push in your training, the rest intervals, the sufficiency of volume, but also how it's mapped on that. So you can put like sequence, or maybe even muscle building program. If you're like, I have no idea, Clarice, I just go and I just do something that they tell me to do, then put sequence or muscle building program. Okay, put the sequence or muscle building program. That was number one, is how do you create the maximum hormonal response, okay, in your training. So before I move on, I'd like all of you to take a moment to answer in the comments section. One, do you do enough volume training? You can answer that. Yes, volume, not enough volume training. Two, do you push moderate to high intensity in your training? Sometimes you don't know, but at least I'm getting you to reflect. Put below, do you push moderate to high intensity in your training? Three, do you have short rest intervals? And four, do you have a very properly sequenced program? So answer those for me. All right. So the next thing that you need to, in terms of, you know, what is the specificity in your training to optimize hormone? Okay, is about training variables. So we need to look at training variables. So what kinds of training variables do we need to look at? Is In terms of your large muscle group, or let's say multi-joint movements, which I spoke about earlier, you need to make sure that you have multi-joint things. If you only do one direction things like a chest press or things like that, you're really taking away a lot of your growth. You need to make sure that there needs to be the multi-joint movements in your program. Another variable is your volume needs to be sufficient. So your volume in reps and sets. So you want to make sure that your volume isn't too low. you know 8, 10 is kind of low for me, personally speaking. Women in their older, they need a lot more volume in place. And so you have to understand how to train more volume and understand the different moves that can maximize that. So this is why, for again, like Zeta, the ones who are in my muscle building programs, you might notice there's a lot of target of volume of that muscle group. And sometimes that's why you probably don't like doing it. Some of my clients, you're like, why again? I'm like, again, more. But there needs to be more volume involved for your growth. Okay. Another variable you need to really pay attention to is training frequency. Your frequency needs to be, the study says you can go between 2 to 4 training frequency. You can have 5 as well, but depending on how it's mapped out. But just like not like every single day and no rest in between. Like you need to have proper training frequencies and like proper rest and recovery in there. So I would say personally, for me, the resistance training should be at least 3 to 4 to get some really solid results. Anything less than that, like I'm going to say you're probably doing too little for your body to grow. But if you're doing like 5, 6 and your body's in super high stress mode, maybe it should be a little bit less. So everybody's different in this regards, but your frequency does need to be intense enough, but you have proper rest and recovery in between. And then, like I said, tempo training is another variable that you want to make sure is there. So tempo training is how long you are within that lift. So obviously, the longer time under tension, the longer you can push for that lift to be a little bit longer, the better it is, but not to a point where it stresses your body. So obviously there's like a sweet zone, but your tempo training needs to usually be a little bit more controlled and more time under tension if you really want to see some really great results. I see some of my clients push through the moves a bit too quick, and we want to make sure that you are staying in the eccentric phase as long as possible, and that will allow you to have better muscle growth, better GH responses, better insulin growth factor. So your tempo training, your rest intervals all really matter. And of course, the last thing is avoiding excess chronic high intensity cardio or overtraining. So you want to make sure you don't have too much HIIT or high intensity things that are causing massive like overloading of the system. So again, those of you who do my training, you'll notice that there is the resistance, but there's like intersperse of those HIIT, but they're not all the time like continuous, right? I prefer that methodology to not be in like that. So like the way I program is really about hormone optimization. It's about what will be best for your hormones, and it's like not just like push through, I need to high intensity get it done in 30 minutes, but like you need the variables, like you need resistance training, you need a little bit of HIIT training, you need a little bit of cardio, you need like mobility work, you need like all of this stuff, which is what I call MTP, right? So those of you who follow me a long time know I call it the menopausal training protocol, is the way that you need to sequence and the different variety of moves in there that needs to all happen within the sequence to make the best like muscle response. Okay. So if you're listening and you're like, well, there's so many things to think about, I want you to put MTP below, because MTP stands for, is the overarching term I give to muscle building for hormone balance. Okay. MTP is menopausal training protocol. I think people are always looking for a band-aid, right? They're like, tell me this, tell me this, tell me this. But I want you to think more holistically. Everything I said, okay? Like there's multiple things you need, the way it's mapped out in the sequence. You need sufficient volume in training. So you need to hit it in different angles and different ways to hit the same muscle group. You need to have big multi-joint compound movements on those. You need to have shorter rest intervals in between, not too long, not too short. You need to have like your proper tempo training within that, your technical execution in it. So this is why I said like, and then you have to make sure that there's like a variety of different types of training within the protocol. So that's why I said like to make it viable for everybody, it's like understanding it's MTP training. This is like training in a way that optimizes your GH and your insulin growth factor as much as you can, while at the same time lowering cortisol. Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about here is training meets recovery and endocrine context. So I have mentioned this before that training is one part and then your recovery is the next really important part. Okay. So your recovery, your sleep, your nutrition, your stress regulation all contributes to your muscle building. So therefore, a really good protocol doesn't just look at your training, it looks at your recovery process. Your recovery process is the key: recovery, sleep, stress regulation. So this is what I want you to think about is if you want to build more muscle, you want better hormone response, you need to pay attention to recovery, sleep, nutrition, stress regulation. So as a woman, you don't want to overstress your stress response, okay? What is something that really impacts stress response? I'm going to give you a couple more things to think about in terms of stress response in your lifting. So you want to avoid constant heavy CNS, central nervous system stress in your lifting. So a couple of things you want to be careful of, okay? As a menopausal woman, you want to be careful of not hitting 90% of 1 RM. So meaning you want to be careful of not always maxing max load. So yes, you need to go heavier. A lot of women don't go heavy enough. But for some of my very experienced lifters, be careful of going too much on max. This can really tax your CNS system and causing fatigue, adrenal fatigue, cortisol spike. Secondly, is you do want a little bit of explosion and power. And again, and the ones who are muscle accelerator, please come to your muscle accelerator class a couple weeks from now, because I prepared that class for a lot of you. And I mean, I know we had to reschedule, but we're going to talk about this, the explosion and power movement. You're going to need some, but controlled. Okay. So be careful of too much explosive work. Okay. If you're doing a lot of explosive work or box jumps or crazy, like high metabolic things, that can tax your CNS system intensely. So you want to be super careful about the CNS taxation. So being careful of too much explosive, as well as high volume compound days without recovery. So if you do a lot of high volume compound days, but you don't put in the recovery in between, and all my clients, you notice there's a sequence in where does your rest days come in? Some of you know that. You look at your program and you know that there's almost every few days, there's that rest program in between, right? So you need to make sure that you don't have too many high volume workload in a row. You need to put the proper rest and recovery in between. And the last one is not too much, I already said this, but I'm repeating myself, not too much CrossFit style WODs or Metcon work, okay? Metcon work is a lot of like as many as you can do within this minute, like a lot of heavy metabolic push, okay? Because typically that will raise a menopausal woman's cortisol level intensely, which will blunt your GH and blunt your insulin growth factor, okay? So you want to make sure that there is like not overtaxation of your central nervous system. So you have to be careful of how much what you do. And that's why I'm going to say to all of you is please try to not think of training just as training. I want you to always ask yourself, is this training supporting my hormone or decreasing my hormone? Like, is it supporting my hormone or not supporting my hormone? Because if you just think workout to workout, for example, 100-day hard is one of those really crazy 100 days. No, that's not 100-day hard. 75 hard, correct? You know, I just think like there's things that you can be like, I'm gonna do this, or I'm gonna decide to do this marathon, which I hear all the time. And it's like, ladies, please, before you try to go, I just need to work harder, I need to lift more, I need to go crazy, I want the 75 hard workout, I want to do this crazy stuff, just ask yourself, as a menopausal woman, is this actually supporting your hormone balance? Okay. So now, kind of like summarizing everything here. Okay. So remember, your goal is to have like an MTP way of working out where you need a mix of different types of training, resistance training, heavy, but not too heavy, not too light, kind of moderate to high intensity. You need to have cardio. Those are my lifting buffs that don't like cardio. Yes, you still need some cardio. You still need to have a little bit hit or lit. Hit or lit. Lit is low intensity interval training, but there's some type of interval in there. You need to have mobility work. You need to have some regeneration, stretch work, different types of work involved. And then you need to be really aware of your rest recovery outside of that: sleep, hormone balance, rest recovery, breath work, like all of the stuff that is involved outside of that to make sure the maximizing your hormone balance. Okay. So again, like to summarize, that is MTP. So let's actually just wrap up here. Okay. After 40, the female body is navigating hormone shifts: drop in estrogen, drop in growth hormone, drop in insulin growth factor axis, altered insulin response, altered cortisol response. So you have to be super specific in the way you train, because your ultimate goal is to maximize hormone response to build as much muscle on your body as possible. As much muscle on your body as possible. Please don't be afraid to build more muscle. Please don't be say, I don't want to look bulky. You are fighting an uphill battle in building muscle. To even gain 1 pound of muscle is so difficult. So you want to optimize hormones to build as much muscle as possible. Okay. And that is going to come from all the things I mentioned above. I'm not going to repeat it, but I have 3 questions for all of you wrapping this up. And I want you to answer this on your sheet if you're listening, or on the comments. Number 1, is your training stimulating the right hormone pathways? You either answer yes, right hormone pathways, or no, not right hormone pathways. Or you could be like on the right track. Like some of my clients are on the right track because they're already doing the program, right? Number 2, this is really important. Answer this: am I recovering? Are you recovering properly? Are you recovering properly? Are you properly recovering with nutrition? And are you properly recovering with sleep? Next one, am I optimizing my muscle building mechanics? Okay. Or am I just doing what worked when I was younger? Am I optimizing muscle building mechanics? So this one is about technique. It's about angles and types of training. Am I optimizing muscle building mechanics, or am I doing more of just worked when I was younger? So put it below. So those are the 3 questions I need you to answer. Is my training stimulating the right hormonal pathways? Am I recovering properly in my nutrition and in my sleep? And am I optimizing muscle building mechanics? Okay, put it below. And at the end of all of this, I want all of you to think about this. I want you to answer for yourself: am I getting hormone balance training? So notice what I said there. It's not about muscle building, more muscle, less fat, although those are byproducts or what will happen. But I want you to think about this: hormone balance training,
Write that down. Hormone balance training. This is the whole point of today's live, is to switch the mindset of I just need to go harder, I need to just work more, I need to lift more, I need to do more HIIT, I need to do more cardio, I need to go do a marathon. I hear all sorts of things. Oshona, you are on calls a lot. I hear it a lot. I need to go for marathons. I need to do this. I need to do my run. I need to do this. And I'm like, before you do all that, you just have to remember those 3 questions I just asked you. And the word, what's the word, everybody? Put it below. Hormone balance training. This is your new word that you need to keep in mind for your training after 40. Hormone balance training. If you got any value out of this, share with me what you learned, and we can replay if you want to re-listen or share this with someone else. Okay, awesome. Hopefully that was a lot of value. I went into a lot of specific detail for all of you. I hope that it added value. So, okay, awesome. So put your comments below, and I will see you next week.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fierce and Fit Mentor podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit the follow button on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, or wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. If something in this episode resonated with you, please leave a review or share it with a friend who'd love it too. Your support means the world and helps us reach more amazing women like you. Until next time, stay fierce, stay fit, and let's keep building your most powerful self.